What is up, BBN? Welcome to the Buckets in the Bluegrass podcast presented by Cats Coverage. I'm your host, Tanin Smith, and this is the introductory episode of this podcast. We felt at Cats Coverage that it would be a good idea to start a dedicated podcast for Kentucky women's basketball to kick off the Kenny Brooks era. There's a ton of excitement around this program right now, a ton of talent. And we really have a lot to talk about. So I'm excited to present this to you guys. I hope the BBN enjoys this. I hope we can continue to grow the fan base for this Kentucky basketball program because, like I said, there is a ton of excitement around it right now. Kenny Brooks is doing a fantastic job resurrecting this program, quite frankly. So I'm very excited to be talking about this team. I'm very excited to get the opportunity to attend the games in person and sit on media row and watch these games and go to the pressers. It's just an honor to be in this situation. So I'm very excited to do this. So I wanted to kick this episode off with a bang. Yesterday, five-star wing Kaelyn Carroll committed to Kentucky, being Kenny Brooks' first official recruit, high school recruit. So, I mean, this is a big one. Kentucky fought off South Carolina and Dawn Staley for her recruitment. I mean, that is literally, they are at the top of the sport right now, and we beat them out for a five-star recruit. I think that speaks volumes about Kenny Brooks and the trust that these players have in him and these players' families. To turn down a program like South Carolina to come to Kentucky is pretty big-time stuff for the program. So she's a 6'2" wing. Minnesota was also a big player in her recruitment, and Kentucky missed out on five-star recruit Zakiya Johnson only a couple of weeks ago, who decided to go to LSU. And, there's been, talk about why the recruiting class hasn't begun to shape up under Brooks. Why is it taking so long to get the first recruitment? And, we got the first commitment out of the way with Kaelyn Carroll. And, the recruiting classes, the high school recruiting classes, aren't quite as big of a deal in women's college basketball right now because these players are required to stay for 4 years. And if you look at Kentucky right now, outside of Georgia A. Moore, Deja Lawrence, we're going to be returning probably most of the roster that we have right now. So it's not quite as big of a deal as it is in like men's basketball to sign a big recruiting class because not only are we going to be keeping most of the players on the roster for a little while, but we also, have the transfer portal to mess around with. And Kenny Brooks, obviously created almost his entire roster this season using the transfer portal. So I think that is not going to be too much of a problem. In terms of other 2025 recruits, there's not really much word about whether we're in a good position with anyone else or whether we're going to land anyone else. There is a 2026 point guard, a four-star Madden Greenway, who is going to be committing to a school in the next couple of weeks, and Kentucky's in a really good position for her. She's like a multi-sport athlete and a four-star point guard, so that could be an exciting commitment as well. But things are a little bit quiet on the high school recruiting front for Kenny Brooks right now. But again, I really don't think it's that big of a deal. So now that we've talked a little bit about the high school recruiting of Kentucky basketball, landing a big-time five-star wing in Kaelyn Carroll, I wanted to kind of recap the first 3 games of the season for Kentucky before we get into previewing the Louisville game, the big Louisville game coming up this Saturday. So Kenny Brooks starts off his career at Kentucky 3-0, and the team has looked dominant thus far. Through the first 3 games, we defeated SC Upstate in the opener 98-42, and that was just a dominant performance from start to finish. You got to see freshman Clara Silva really dominate the game. I think she had 7 or 8 blocks in that game, just completely erasing anything at the rim. So that was exciting to watch. I mean, she's been one of the most talked about players coming into this season just because she's 6'7", and is one of the taller players in the country. And, there were talks about if she was an American recruit, she would have been a top 5 recruit in the class. So landing Clara Silva was big, and she's already making a big impact as well. In the second game of the season, Kentucky defeated Northern Kentucky 70-41. And that game started off a little bit more sloppy. In the SC Upstate game, it was pretty much from start to finish a dominant performance. But it took Kentucky a little while to get adjusted in the Northern Northern Kentucky game. Obviously, like I said, ended up winning that game 70-41. It was still a really good performance. Clara Strack had almost a triple-double in that game. And Clara Strack is a player that I definitely want to talk about for a little while because at this point, she's the MVP of this Kentucky team. Through the first 3 games, she's averaging 17.7 points, 11.3 rebounds, but she's also averaging 5 assists and 3.3 blocks per game. So right now, the Virginia Tech transfer Clara Strack is dominating. And she's a 6'5" big down in the paint. She's the starting center. She followed Kenny Brooks over from Virginia Tech along with Georgia Amore. And, Georgia Amore was kind of the big talking point of like, hey, this is one of the best players in the entire country. Amore was a multi-time All-American. She was really, really good at Virginia Tech. So she got a lot of the discussion around her coming in, and deservedly so. But Clara Strack is the one at this point who has really, really shown to be a very, very good player. I think we could see her being in the SEC Player of the Year race if she keeps this up. She is literally impacting every single aspect of the game. So I would say she's been Kentucky's most impactful player so far. And then in the 3rd game of the season, Kentucky defeated Wofford 76-42. So 3 dominant performances. Kentucky got off to an extremely hot start in that game, especially Deja Lawrence. She caught fire at the beginning of that game. Deja Lawrence is Kentucky's leading scorer behind Clara Strack, and right now she's averaging 12.7 points per game. So Lawrence coming from Charlotte, she was another one that people were talking about. She's a grad transfer, a 5th-year senior. This will be her last year in college. So that backcourt of Georgia Amore and Deja Lawrence, Lawrence averaged 18 points per game at Charlotte. She was really good over there. So having those two in the backcourt, having 2 experienced bucket getters like Amore and Lawrence has been really nice. And then I talked about Clara Silva a little bit earlier. She is 3rd on the team in scoring, averaging 12.0 points per game. She's also averaging 5.3 boards, and she leads the country in blocks per game right now, averaging 4.7 blocks per game. So you're almost getting 5 blocks per game out of a 6'7" true freshman, Clara Silva, who is coming off the bench. She's coming off the bench, averaging 5 blocks per game. So it's a really exciting prospect to think about Clara Silva and Clara Strack. I mean, they will be together for the next 3 years, and that's going to be, you have 6'7" and 6'5". Both of them are averaging, like I said, Silva's averaging almost 5 blocks per game. Strack is averaging 3.3 blocks per game. So between those two, we might have 2 of the better rim protectors in the entire country on the same team. And I think that's going to pay dividends, especially once conference play starts and we're playing against these teams like South Carolina and LSU who have these big players down low. I think that's going to be a really nice weapon for us to have. So I talked about Georgia Amore a little bit and how excited everyone was for her coming in. And so far, she has taken much more of a playmaking role for the Cats. She's averaging 8.3 assists per game, which has to be one of the top numbers in the country in terms of assists per game. But she's also averaging almost 12 points per game as well. And Kenny Brooks kind of talked a little bit after the SC Upstate game. He said that, Georgia Amore, usually in the beginning of these seasons, at least since he's been coaching her, she'll start off the season just trying really hard to get the rest of her teammates involved and be a playmaker first, a pass first player. And then as the season goes on, that's when she starts to become more of a scoring threat. Still, she's putting up 12 points per game to go along with 8 assists and 5 rebounds per game as well. She's been rebounding really well, which is impressive considering she's only 5'6". And has never been really a big rebounder in her career, but she's averaging almost 5 or over 5 boards per game right now. So that is definitely exciting to see. And, anyone who's concerned about her scoring, like I said, Kenny Brooks said in the first press conference of the season that, she will eventually pick up the scoring and that her intent at the beginning of the year is to, get her teammates the ball and kind of instill confidence in the teammates. And I think that's, a really good way to go about the beginning of the season because we know she can score. Anyone who's watched basketball over the last 4 years knows that, Georgia Amore can score the basketball. So that's not really an actual concern. She is just trying to get the rest of her team going. So that's been nice. Tiani Key, the North Carolina transfer, has been really, really good. She had a really great debut against SC Upstate. So it's been nice to see her do that as well, because she was really a non-factor for North Carolina last year. And, now she's come in and she's earned a starting role on the team and has played really well. The junior college transfer, Amelia Hassett, has also been really good. She's averaging 8 points and 10 rebounds, and especially in the SC Upstate game, I think she knocked down like 4 threes in that game. She's shown the ability, even though she's 6'3", and most 6'3" forwards in women's college basketball are typically post players. She has been primarily a perimeter player, which just shows her versatility, because if we need to put her in the paint, we can. But right now she's kind of hovering out on the perimeter. She's been knocking down threes, and is one of the better perimeter threats on the team so far. So she also had 16 rebounds against Northern Kentucky. When she was in JUCO, she averaged double-digit rebounds. So Amelia Hassett was a great addition to this team. I didn't really expect her to make this type of impact at first. So watching her kind of become that perimeter threat, become that high-level rebounder, and I mean, she's the fourth option on offense right now, and is still fourth or fifth option on offense right now, and is still carving out a role and creating an impact. I wanted to talk about Cassidy Rowe. She's only one of 2 players to return from last season's team, and she has been really, really good so far. She's a junior now. And under Kyra Elzy, she was always that glue player. She came in and she hustled, and she talked, and she was verbal, and she, was a good leader on the court, but the stats didn't pop off the page. But she was one of 2 players to return from Kyra Elzy's roster. She bleeds blue through and through, grew up in Kentucky, and grew up dreaming about putting on the blue and white. So I don't think we ever have to worry about Cassidy Rowe transferring. But so far she's been playing really well. She's knocked down a couple really tough threes. Whenever Georgia Amore ends up coming out of the game and is taking a breather, Cassidy comes in and initiates the offense as the point guard, and she's done a really good job at that, taking the ball down the court, and like I said, calling the plays, initiating the offense. She's very verbal, she's very uplifting for her teammates, and I think Cassidy has done a great job so far in that bench leadership role, where the stats don't pop off the page. She's not going to put up 15 points per game, but she'll come in, she'll knock down a couple tough threes, she'll play tough defense, she'll fight through screens. She had a really nice block against Wofford at the end of the third quarter. Wofford was trying to put up a buzzer beater, and Cassidy just came out of nowhere and blocked it out of bounds. And she's an energy player, and she's done a really good job at that. And I think that players like that are extremely important for winning teams, especially a player like Cassidy, who grew up in Kentucky and is a Kentucky Wildcat and is playing for the name on the front of the jersey. I think that's a really, really big benefit to have on your team. And so, speaking of other players who were on last year's team, there's only one other one, and that's Sanaya Tyler, who was actually, I think, like the second leading scorer on last year's Kentucky team, which, albeit was not a very good team and didn't have a very good season. But I've been very surprised up to this point about Sanaya Tyler not getting much of a role. Right now, she's averaging 5.3 minutes per game, 0.7 points per game, and it just seems like she is struggling to find a role or carve out a role on this team. And we know Sanaya Tyler's a good basketball player. We watched her last year. I mean, despite maybe being a little bit inefficient at times, she's a good guard. She's a good point guard. She can initiate the offense. She can knock down tough shots. So it'll be interesting to see if, as the season progresses, Sanaya Tyler will be getting a bigger role. But at this point in the season, she's basically just playing in garbage time. But either way, it's been really exciting to have, these first 3 games where Kentucky has looked extremely dominant. I mean, if this was last season, we're not going to talk too much about previous administrations, but, we didn't look dominant at any point during the Kyra Elzy tenure. I mean, we just never had games where it's like after the first 3 games of the season, you're like, wow, this is a really good basketball team. That did not happen. So right now, looking at this roster that Kenny Brooks has put together, looking at his game plan, looking at his offensive sets, looking at the way they play defensively, looking at the hustle, the perimeter shooting, the leadership, the camaraderie of this team, it's very, very exciting to watch this team and to say, hey, we're here, we're legit. And I think that once conference play starts, specifically, that respect will start to settle in to where it's like, we haven't really been much of a threat in conference play in a while. We finished near the bottom, if not at the bottom of the SEC last year. And so it's been rough riding for the Kentucky women's basketball program lately. And I think Kenny Brooks came in and immediately injected energy, immediately injected talent that we haven't seen in a while at Kentucky. So I really, really like Kenny Brooks. I like his demeanor. I like the way he approaches things. I love the relationship he appears to have with his players. They all seem to love him. They all seem to trust him, and for good reason. I mean, he's putting these players in really good positions to win. And I mean, it's just like Mark Pope. It was kind of a beautiful parallel of Mark Pope coming in at the exact same time as Kenny Brooks, the men's program with a brand new coach, the women's program with a brand new coach. Both of them had to utilize the transfer portal to put together a competent roster. And you look at these rosters and you're like, how did these two guys manage to put together rosters like this? And much like Mark Pope just had his big first career win at Kentucky, upsetting Duke in the Champions Classic a couple of days ago, Kenny Brooks will have the opportunity to get a similar caliber win because we play Louisville on Saturday. And so I wanted to preview that game a little bit as the final talking point of today's episode. I just wanted to talk about this Louisville game, talk about this Louisville team, and mostly just kind of predict what I think is going to happen. Again, neither one of us have any like big wins at this point in the season. Louisville is sitting at 2-1 right now. They lost their first game of the year to UCLA, who is a top 5 team. So understandably, Louisville did not win that game, but they have won their last 2. So they beat Southern Indiana and UT Martin, both pretty handily. And obviously, Louisville is a respectable women's basketball program. They have been, I would say, better than us for sure over the last few years. So this is going to be a really fun game. They're ranked 18th. We're ranked 20. So it'll be a battle of 2 top 20 teams. It's a rivalry game, obviously. So this will be Kenny Brooks' first big game at Kentucky, and I feel really good about it, to be honest with you. The game is at 6:00, so if you're going to the UK Murray State football game at 1:30, then you will definitely have plenty of time to make it to this Kentucky versus Louisville game. It could end up being a really fun day of sports for a lot of fans if you end up going to both of those games. And that's another thing. I mean, Historic Memorial Coliseum is brand new. And it's a beautiful facility. I mean, the renovations they did, I mean, it's completely unrecognizable. It's amazing in there. Definitely a very nice venue at this point. And through the first few games of the season, I in my opinion, the attendance hasn't been quite what I thought it would be. And I feel like, if we end up beating Louisville, that's going to be one of those things that starts to put more people in seats, just kind of like, okay, that's the big win that we were looking for. This is an exciting team. I wish that would have happened already. I mean, if anyone's paying any sort of attention, anybody who's paying any sort of attention sees that this is a really good and really fun Kentucky women's basketball team. So hopefully this Louisville game, I mean, hopefully it'll be packed out. Again, it's a rivalry game, 2 top 20 teams. And it's not interfering with the UK Murray State game. So I would be very happy if it was a packed house in Memorial, which it should be for this game. So like I said, they're sitting at 2-1 right now. ESPN's FPI predictor is giving Louisville a 71% chance to win this game. It's at Memorial Coliseum. 71% chance for Louisville to win this game. I'm not sure what goes into this ESPN FPI predictor thing, but this is eerily similar to the Kentucky and Duke thing, because I think Duke was also given a 71 or 72% chance to beat Kentucky in the Champions Classic by the ESPN FPI predictor. So this is pretty much the exact same scenario, except from what I've seen through 3 games from both teams, Kentucky looks like the better team. Louisville's leading scorer is Tajiana Roberts, who's averaging 15 points per game, followed by Olivia Cochran and Nyla Harris. Those are their top 3 scorers, and the only 3 players on Louisville that are averaging double-digit points. Cochran is averaging 12 points per game. Nyla Harris is averaging 10. And they're a good team. They're a deep team as well. But I really just think, our post presence of Claire Strack down in the middle, I think it's going to be really hard for Louisville to combat her as well as Clara Silva, and with those 2 down low to rim protect, I feel really good about that. Having Georgia Amore running the point, and I think this is the game where you could definitely see Georgia Amore kind of take over in the scoring column if other players are struggling, because again, we haven't played a team of this caliber yet. So it's going to be an adjustment for our players to get there. But a lot of our players have been around the block. A lot of our players have been in college for a while and have been in games like this. So I definitely expect, at least early on, for Georgia Amore and Deja Lawrence to kind of take control of the game, with them being the two fifth-year seniors. Both of them averaged 18 points per game at their previous schools. I mean, Georgia Amore is a projected top 5 pick in the WNBA draft. She's a preseason All-American. She was an All-American at Virginia Tech. So definitely feeling very good about those two, and I'm feeling good about our backcourt. Whenever you have two really, really experienced guards who can initiate the offense and score, they're definitely going to be getting, I feel like, a lot of the usage at the beginning of the game. Like I said, feeding Clara Strack in the post, bringing in Clara Silva for rim protection. Amelia Hassett on the perimeter. This is a game that I feel like Cassidy Rowe would thrive in, coming off the bench and providing energy. And this game might mean a little bit more to her, with her being a lifelong Kentucky fan, and this being a rivalry game against Louisville. So I feel good about this game. I feel like we are the better team. I feel like Kentucky is a more talented team. I think we've got more playmakers. I think we've got more bucket getters, and I think we've got more height, more rim protection, all that. So hopefully I'm not jinxing us right now, but I feel really, really good about this game. And again, it could end up being a huge statement victory for Kenny Brooks to start off his Kentucky career. And if he does it only a few days after Mark Pope got his first big program defining win against Duke, I think that would be, poetic in a way. So I'm definitely excited. I definitely trust Kenny Brooks. Kenny Brooks coached in the ACC against Louisville for many years. So, he's got that, he's got that familiarity with Louisville already, playing against them a handful of times. So I feel good about it. Same with Georgia Amore, same with Clara Strack. They played against them last year. So I feel good about it. I just hope we can get this win. So very excited, really, really hoping that we can pack out Memorial Coliseum because this team deserves it. I think through the first 3 games, they've really impressed me, and I've heard from a lot of people who maybe typically don't watch the women's basketball team. They have come around to it. I think basketball in general is just fun again in the state of Kentucky. I mean, not to linger too much on previous coaches, but obviously the magic had left with John Calipari, and you bring in Mark Pope, who is a alum, and he, resurrects the program almost immediately, or literally immediately, not even almost, immediately resurrects the program. And then you see what has happened over the last few years with the Kentucky basketball program, having to move on from Kyra Elzy, and you go get a phenomenal, proven coach in Kenny Brooks, who brings in an amazing collection of talent, including 2 of his top players from Virginia Tech, and puts together a really, really solid, experienced, and talented roster. And now he has an opportunity to have a very similar moment to Mark Pope. So that'll pretty much do it for the talking points today. I had a very good time discussing this. We'll definitely have guests and co-hosts in the future. It won't just be me 24/7. But yeah, definitely excited to get this pod going. We'll definitely do one after the Louisville game and kind of talk about that in depth and break down that game. And, it's just good. It's good times for the Kentucky women's basketball program. I am extremely excited for it. So yeah, thank you guys for watching, and go Big Blue.